The Sons of Socrates changed the whole course of philosophy. Of course, the famous one, Plato, we all know. But the five lesser ones that I've been talking about not only helped change the way philosophy worked, but also helped shape the life of antiquity. All but one of those schools have entered our common everyday English today that made a big difference in the way the world's been lived. Why are those changes so important? What do I think about those schools of philosophy and their possibility of being followed today? And so much more as we begin talking philosophy. Well, let's start with the schools, and let me do a quick reminder of what they're all about and how they've entered our language today. The Cyrenaics, of course, didn't enter our language today. The Cyrenaics, I think, probably relied too much on personality in order to be a successful way of life. If you didn't have his personality, his ability to win over people, well, as we see, the whole movement sort of died off after his grandson. The one lesson it taught, that pleasure was the ultimate good, wasn't really deep or really very informative. But it did remind us that philosophy is not just something cooked up by physicists and metaphysicians. It also belongs to ethicists and people who lead everyday lives. The next school, the Cynics, got adopted into our language quite easily. We all know that. The Cynic of today is not the Cynic of the past. The Cynic of the past was a holier-than-thou gadfly who wanted to be sure that everybody lived right. The Cynic of today sort of looks at everybody and says, you just can't live right, can you? You're just not possible that you could do it. The old Cynic was hopeful. The new Cynic lacks hope. The Cynics survived for a very long time. Christian historian Burton Mack believes that the Cynics probably had some kind of influence in Christianity. I suggest you read his book if you want to understand that better. I'll have a note down below. So the Cynics survived, but as I said on the day, I just don't think the Cynics was something that everybody could be. I mean, we can't all be holier than the other guy. It just doesn't work. The skeptic, again, here's the word, and our word skeptic means exactly what the old word skeptic meant. You can't know that. There are things you just don't know, you just can't know, and the skeptic is aware that that's reality. More than anything, I think the skeptic introduced us to the idea that insecurity and uncertainty can be part of philosophical investigation. The great blossoming comes several hundred years later, around 1500 to be exact, in the work of René Descartes, who gave us his methodological doubt and took philosophy out of the hands of the Christians and put it into the hands of anyone who's willing to make the effort to challenge their beliefs. The remaining two schools, the Stoics and the Epicureans, had the longest lives in antiquity and the most successful. I mentioned on the Stoic occasion that Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, was a Stoic. I also mentioned Epictetus, a slave. Although a freed slave later in life, a slave was also a Stoic, obeying exactly the same principles as the Emperor of Rome. Astonishing to think that such a thing could be true, but it was. The Stoic has such power. Now today we use the word Stoic and we only emphasize the ability to deal with pain and the dispassionate nature of the Stoic, who faces any setback with the stiff upper lip, any challenge with the plain, fixed, dull face. I mean, that's our vision of the Stoic. Mr. Spock is our vision of the Stoic. Of course, the Stoic of antiquity was devoted to the Logos, to this idea that there was some single great force that guided the universe, that we could discover that great force by using its tool, logic, to uncover what it had to say, that we then could lead logical, orderly lives in tune with that Logos. Some of you may be wondering how the Stoics and the Epicureans really settle off against each other. Well, let me make it clear now. The Stoic has the Logos, this guiding force in life that keeps everything orderly and organized. For the Epicurean, everything is purely material. There is a pattern, but it's not a discernible pattern. It's not even a pattern you'd care to discern to how things move. We're told that there's some element of freedom in it, that swerving is possible, and that swerving can be done intentionally by people like you and me. But it really isn't the point. For the Epicurean, it's all material, and it's all going on its own, blindly, unintentionally, with no goal or purpose to it. Stoics have purpose, Epicureans don't. It is indeed this difference in the nature of the universe that the Stoic has a guiding force, that the Epicurean sees life as essentially random, that enables the one, Stoicism, to be embraced by religious groups, whereas Epicurean thinking, as we've seen, suggests that the gods have nothing to do with human life, and couldn't even if they wanted to, which they wouldn't want because they're so busy being perfect they don't want anything. So the Stoic fits normal religious living, the Epicurean doesn't. One more way that they differentiate. Neither wants drama. Both tell us these lessons. Epictetus in his manual says, if your son dies, say, there's a dead child. If your home burns, say, there's a burned building. We're not to react to these with emotion. The emotion upsets the ataraxia, the apatheia. It keeps us from being at peace. The Epicurean teaches the same thing, as I mentioned already, that families aren't worth having, that being in politics isn't worth doing, that having material ambitions in the world just not worth what it costs you in terms of the pain and suffering associated with it. Even something that most of us enjoy, sexual intercourse, is described as a necessary evil because it gets in the way of peaceful level harmony. We're told about Epicurus's garden that men and women lived in it as equals, but as completely sexual neutral equals. There was no intercourse permitted on site. Okay, and that brings us to what I have to say about all of this. The Cynic life is an impossible life. I mean, it's totally impossible today. But even in its time, you could not build a society around Cynics. The Stoic life, maybe, I mean, certainly in terms of Marcus Aurelius, permits there to be a culture built around it. But what kind of culture? I mean, there are no great Stoic sculptures, no great Stoic songs, no great Stoic poets. They all wrote prose, the Stoics. The Epicureans at least wrote some poetry. Stoicism seems too orderly and too closed off for real human experience. Now, the Epicurean wants pleasure, but the pleasures are small. There'd be no progress with the Epicureans. Why would you bother? It's just something to get in your way. And we may not like it. It may cause trouble. Now, again, you may say something like, well, look what the progress has brought us. What a terrible state the world is in. The world's not in a terrible state. Okay. You say, well, what about climate change? You know climate change is real, Anthony. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And things are probably much worse than they would be without what we've done in terms of technology. But this is the 6th great extinction. There have already been 5. The next one was coming one way or the other. Climate change comes every so often. It was coming, maybe not this quick, maybe not this violently, but it was coming one way or the other. And what have we gotten for it? Overpopulation? No. We're a long way from overpopulated. People are living longer than ever. People are healthier than ever. Believe it or not, there's more peace in the world than ever. Violence is at an all-time low. I'll point you to the Steven Pinker book with all the details down below. Life is good. Life is the best it's ever been. We would not have that with this Epicurean view of why take chances? Why rock the boat? What if things go wrong? But most of all, I say to all three of those schools. Now, the skeptic is simply an epistemological school. Forget about it for ethics and lifestyle. The Cyrenaic, we've acknowledged, belongs to certain people, and it still belongs to those people today. There are still people who get by on personality and goodwill and find the pleasure that they need in the world. But the life of the Cynic, of the Stoic, and of the Epicurean eventually closes the door to so much of human experience. These are not schools of thought that encourage you to help your fellow human being. They're very individualized. These are not schools of thought that embrace the idea of family, of striving, of attachment to other people. When you see your wife dead on the floor, which Epicurus never did, which Epictetus never did, if you can say, there lies a dead woman, I don't want to know you. That's not the way human beings should live. We should love one another. We should take chances on one another. We should take chances on learning, on living, on growing, and on dying. And to try to live the tiny little lives that the Epicureans want, or the Stoics want, or the Cynics absolutely encourage. I have no party with them. I guess I'm still a Nietzschean. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Okay. That's me on the Sons of Socrates. You've heard how important they were, and they were very important. They changed everything. There's still that one big son I haven't talked about, Plato, and I'll have to talk about Plato. But in the meantime, I want you to enjoy your life, have your good times, keep on talking philosophy. And if you want to come back and talk it with me, so much the better. Please subscribe to the site. Please share it with your friends. Ask me whatever questions you have. So long.